What up, it's your boy T on reactions. So I feel like doing some reactions, some video game reactions though. I wanted to do more from what's the homie name? I just straight forgot already. SleepyheadDree. Yesterday I did a wrestling one with wrestling reaction with wrestling games on the NES and SNES Super Nintendo from worst to best as well too. The first one I did do was the worst Game Boy games of all time, but now I'm going to keep going with the Game Boy. You know, one of the most iconic handheld game console ever. I think it was like the first that did something like that as well too, with the good graphics as they had as well too. At time, the graphics were a little better than their predecessor, the NES, a little bit. You know, they supposedly had the same around the same bit, had the same bit, but slightly higher, as they did a lot of when Super Nintendo came out, they did a lot of games based on that. Looked a little better than Nintendo as well too. And two, it was my first game console I owned as well too. So anyway, so some games might bring some fond memories. So this one is a good one I thought to start with, to continue with as well too, called 10 underrated Game Boy games you should play. So without further ado, we'll look at them 10 underrated Game Boy games that you play as well too. Though I'm going to make sure you have any other Game Boy Viz as well too. Other than that, because the worst one was the newest one he got, so I stuck with that. Let me see. Yeah, well, underrated. Pretty much there's only one, and the third one, which we'll do later another time as well too, for the slightly advanced version of the Game Boy. But anyway, we're gonna stick with the OG Game Boy game with 10 underrated Game Boy games you should play. Let's get it.
This great brick has changed billions of lives. I mean, playing with it, by the way, though I don't doubt you could probably beat someone to death with it if you really wanted to. I mean, it survived the bombing, for Christ's sakes.
Boy.
The game.
Yeah, I saw that. Somebody actually showed that. I saw that too. I saw about that too. I remember that.
Boy was the perfect portable console, even with its many limitations.
Yes.
In fact, I think the limitations actually made the games have to innovate more, and the following games in this video definitely don't get enough recognition for what they brought to us. Quick note, if you're looking for any Game Boy Color games on this list, they won't be here. They have their own list coming up, in no particular order.
And that's the other one I'm gonna say. That's the other one right there.
Here are 10 underrated Game Boy games you should play. Now, TMNT beat-em-ups are not a new thing. Between the arcade, NES, Super Nintendo, and Genesis,
I recently played this one because I got the Cowbone collection though. It's so-so. It's a so-so. It's good, but compared to the two OGs, the first two ones, it's okay.
People have had their fill of choice. The Game Boy even had their own set of games to hold over to mobile gamers. The first two are very basic, but for my money, I recommend you try TMNT 3. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 Radical Rescue was released on the Game Boy in 1993 by Konami. You control Michelangelo as he gets back home to find all of his brothers missing, kidnapped by the Foot Clan. You must explore the map, defeat enemies, avoid traps, and go about finding pizza, keys, and other items in order to individually free your brothers to take on Shredder. This game is not linear like all the others. In fact, it could be classified as a Metroidvania. You can take on any boss you find to get a key to free the other turtles, who then become usable in-game. Each turtle is differentiated by their special abilities, like Michelangelo being able to float in the air using his nunchucks, and Raph being able to hide in a shell to protect from damage.
Wow, okay.
This game is
I didn't get another chance though. For first, I was like, it was like slow and dragging. But
really pretty for a Game Boy game. The sprites are rather.
I will say the graphics ain't even pretty good. Just the gameplay. it was just a little frustrating at first.
Distinct and exploring is actually really fun. The bosses can be challenging, but overall, it's worth it to check this rather obscure game out.
Alright, what we got next?
We have our first non-North American game on the list because Trip World didn't come out in the North American regions. And it's a shame too, because this game is worth playing for any owners of a portable console. Trip World was released on the Game Boy in 1992, and it was developed by Sunsoft. You control Yakapoo the bunny creature.
Just off the strength of it, looks like a cool, fun game to play. Like, that's one thing about Game Boy game. That is like cute. Some of these like basic games like this was like fun to play.
Whose main goal is to
side-scroll
find the
games.
Flower of Peace, which has been stolen and has caused the citizens of the world to experience the pedestrian's riot cheat from GTA. Trip World is a platformer where you can jump from platform to platform, avoiding pits and spikes using your stubby little kick to attack enemies. So what makes this game stand out? Simple. Yakapoo is able to transform between 3 base forms. There's his normal form, with the previously mentioned jumping and kicking. There's the flying form, which lets Yakapoo fly briefly. And then there's the fish form, which while useless on land, allows Yakapoo to swim fast and shoot bubbles in water. These forms allow the gameplay to remain fluid, with the transformations required to progress across specific obstacles. That's not all, however, as the pickups you can get will allow you to change into even more forms. There's Tiny Form, which makes Yakapoo small, Tail Form, which gives a stronger physical attack, Ball Form, which prevents most damage and turns into a ball, and many more to find. Now, if you're like me, you've probably had Kirby in the back of your mind playing this, but I would argue that Trip World differentiates itself enough to step out of Kirby's shadow and show everyone that it is worth being experienced.
Alright, we got next.
Okay, before you admit,
Yes. This game right here, this was like it combined a little bit element of Super Mario World and all that, but it was his own game and it was fun to play. It was so fun to play. Yes. Man, it took me later on down the line to get the emulator or get on Game Boy Advance as an extra or anything and get to beat Wario and all that, but still, this was a fun game.
immediately go to the comments and say, a Mario game underrated? L plus ratio plus you were never on, Dre. Let me explain. I don't think Super Mario...
it belongs in there. It belongs on the ratings. Don't get talked about a lot. If you hear the Mario games, you won't hear about the Mario Brothers games on the NES, Mario World, Super Mario 64, Mario Kart, and even the Sunshine, and of course the New Super era. But nobody really talks about land. Nobody talks about land in general, let alone Super Mario Land 2, man. And not because people don't, and I'm surprised don't talk about it since it was the introduction to a well-known Mario villain who get his own game. That's Wario.
Mario Land 2 is too underrated in terms of the Game Boy. Everyone who's played it knows it's great, but I think it's underrated in terms of the Mario franchise as a whole.
Yes.
Super Mario Land 2,
Yes.
6 Golden Coins, was released on the Game Boy in 1992 and made by, well, Nintendo. This sequel to the 1989 Super Mario Land is superior in every way, and I feel no guilt in saying that. Being released after Super Mario World, this game directly takes sprites from the game, and for a Game Boy game, it looks great.
Yeah,
even though
that's the thing. It's a Game Boy game, and it's almost just because if you saw Super Mario Land, it was literally Mario Brothers tinier, the old school Mario Brothers tinier. This surpassed both the first 3 NES game, and pretty much they equal to the Mario World in a way.
Only black and white or green on the Super Game Boy. Everything is distinct with new additions on existing sprites. Everything else that was created specifically for this game is also great.
Yes.
Backgrounds and new enemies? Great. The music? Amazing.
The music.
Wario? Yes.
There you go.
This is the first appearance of Wario in the series. And of course, he's the main bastard. This game usually gets left out of the best of Mario games list, and I really disagree with that. Give this game its due before the terrifying first sprite Wario comes after you. James Bond 007 was released on Game Boy in 1998? Huh? I'm surprised this wasn't for the Game Boy Color. Anyway, this game was made by Sapphire and published by Nintendo. Now, what would you expect the gameplay for a 007 game to be? The console games were either FPS or action shooters, so does this game match? Well, no actually. This game is actually a Legend of Zelda style adventure game.
Yeah, see,
and no, I'm not kidding. You control James Bond across a couple of different missions, walking around a scrolling screen across a map layout.
In my opinion, you guys should call this a trilogy, because I said that Legend. I don't know why. I felt like Legend Link's Link's Awakening. Make sure that's the right one. Make sure the right one. 'Cause I think I said it wrong. Link of the Past is Super Nintendo. Link's Awakening. I feel like it's partly gathered the old school Zelda game. It also low-key remind me of the Roger Rabbit game as well too. If you ever played a Roger Rabbit game on Game Boy, fun game, man. It'd be crazy that's in this list too. But this is good. This is giving me that vibe as well too.
Talking to various bystanders, finding items, and solving puzzles around fetch quests while laying the smackdown on various enemies. While this sounds like a mess and a half, it's actually a real tight bundle of fun. The game can actually suck you in when you're questing across the map to find new tools to help grant you access to new areas. And while the combat is pretty basic, every new item helps out against the harder gun-wielding enemies. And with the James Bond property being represented, franchise players like M, Q, and Oddjob all show up, bringing with them an air of legitimacy to the Savvy Spy series. This game may be a little oddity that you really have to play to believe.
Alright, we got next.
Gargoyle's Quest was released on Game Boy in 1990 by Capcom. This game is a spin-off of the Ghosts and Goblins franchise and is actually the first game in its own series that continued on the NES as Gargoyle's Quest in 1992 and the Super Nintendo as Demon's Quest in 1994. You play as Firebrand, the annoying fucker who killed many Arthurs in his day. Firebrand must venture across the ghoul realm.
Yeah, let me just hold on. Is that? I think I might recognize that one. Give me a second. I think I might recognize that one real quick. The game quests. I think I might recognize the game. Yeah, the green gargoyle, the one with the green gargoyle on the cover. Yeah, okay. I did not know it was part of it was based off of Ghosts and Goblins. Wow. Okay, yeah, I was always remember because if you get into the Game Boy, you always get like a little booklet that show first you get the instruction book, then that show booklets of other games and stuff like that. This was one of them.
Gathering items and upgrades while fighting against the destroyers so he can become the protector, Red Blaze, at least in theory. The most accurate way I can describe this game is Zelda 2. You have two gameplay styles, one overhead like an RPG map screen, and the other a side-scrolling platformer, just like Zelda 2. With Firebrand though, you have access to different abilities than Link, such as hovering, wall climbing, and different projectiles that can all be upgraded, leading to a different gameplay feel from Zelda 2. In the overhead gameplay mode, Firebrand can wander around towns talking to the various locals for clues and items, and can walk around the world map to the individual level sections. You are also susceptible to random encounters in Overworld 2, another thing just like Zelda 2. Honestly, Zelda 2 is overhated by the community at large because it's the outlier in the Zelda gameplay cycle. So any excuse to play another game just like that is enough for me. But that doesn't diminish what Gargoyle's Quest does on its own, especially on the go. The plot structure is simple enough, but engaging. The different upgrades you can get leave you curious about what's next, and the music and sprites are all excellent. This is another Game Boy spin-off that can fully stand on its own 2 feet. Kid Dracula was released for the Game Boy in 1993 by Konami. It is a sequel/remake of the early release Famicom title, Akumajo Special, Boku Dracula-kun, and is considered a part of the Konami Castlevania franchise. You control Kid Dracula as he, along with his servant Death, ventures out to stop his traitorous minions who have joined his returning nemesis, Galamoth. Kid Dracula, though, has forgotten most of his spells, so it requires you, the player, to defeat each boss in each level in order to recover each spell. If you are a fan of simple platformers, this is the game for you, especially on the go. Kid Dracula
This is the thing about it. Simple platform game, it was always fun to play, no matter what it was.
starts out with only a few abilities, including turning into a bat to fly over obstacles, but for each boss you defeat, you gain a few new interesting features, such as homing beams, attack bats, a bomb blast that helps you traverse through levels, and an umbrella, which is just perfect to deflect attacks coming towards you. As dark and classical the Castlevania series is as a whole, Kid Dracula is an interesting departure with its kid-friendly aesthetic, but is worth checking out if you are even the tiniest bit interested in the gameplay and the lore. Solomon's Club, also known as Solomon's Key, was released in 1986 for the Game Boy, NES, PC Engine, and the Commodore 64. This version was developed by Graphic Research, a puzzle platformer. You control Dana, and your goal is to go into every level to get Solomon's Key and get to the exit without getting hurt by enemies or letting the time run out. Dana will die instantly if touched, so the key is to avoid any hazards that may be in your way. You can fight back, however, by creating and destroying blocks at will and making enemies fall and use power-ups that can help you defeat the enemies. The level structure means you can choose what level you want to do at any point, which includes 5 worlds with 10 levels each, which is perfect for portable card games. In fact, Solomon's Club reminds me of apps nowadays with its pick-up-and-play nature, you know, without the microtransactions, gambling, and general predatory business behavior. You can continue on with a password given after every cleared stage, so you can continue on, slowly working your way across the game, finding secrets until eventually you beat it and feel on top of the world. And then you start over again because dang, this game is addictive.
Right. We got next.
Mole Mania was released for the Game Boy in 1997 and developed by Pax Softnica. A little known fact about this game is that it was produced by Shigeru Miyamoto. Yes, the Mario Maker himself. And with that fact known, is it any surprise Mole Mania, while not well known, is a really good game? You play as Muddy Mole, a family man who has had his family stolen from him by Jinbei, a grumpy farmer, and the ruler of the land. So I'm guessing it's Alabama. You must solve screen after screen.
And animation of the farmer with little Mario X as well too.
Screen,
so yes.
Moving objects and throwing and pulling black balls to make your way to the next area.
And
the main feature distinguishing Mole Mania is the option to dig underground, which is used extensively in some puzzles. Sometimes you may want to avoid an enemy this way, sometimes you just need to get to the other side of a particularly ornery object blocking your progress. The ingenuity between the use of these few mechanics makes solving puzzles particularly delightful. Going from level to level, you can really start to see the developers' minds working as they crafted a fun experience for anyone who gave it a chance. This game never received a proper sequel, which is a shame. I feel like a Mole Mania app would actually be pretty popular. Hopefully with less loot boxes for new hats though.
We got next.
Uh-oh, we got another non-North American release game on the list. Man, the Japanese and Europeans were really petty to us pure non-violent and holy Americans. Hammer and Harry, Ghost Building Company was released on Game Boy in 1992, and it was made by Irem and Atlas. This game is actually the third game in the Carpenter Gen series, with the previous 2 coming out on arcade and Famicom. You control Harry, who's just a simple...
It's crazy like that too. They had like a third or a sequel of a game. It was played on the original, and it comes on another console like game where the first Metro, like for example, the first Metro was on NES, and then Metro 2 came on Game Boy and stuff like that. It's crazy they do that though.
Japanese carpenter trying to save the love of his life, his hometown. Oh, and I guess this lady right here. This game is a beat 'em up with Harry wielding his trademark hammer against a variety of ghosts and ghouls coming to take him down. Harry can swing in all 4 directions and attack in the air with his hammer. His downswing is actually a ground pound move, which will stun enemies briefly. This game is pretty simple. Walk around the crazy environment, defeat all the enemies, move on. It's monotonous, but for the Game Boy, which is built around quick playing, it will entertain you dearly. The game isn't too hard to find online, so if you ever want a quick beat 'em up to keep you busy on a car ride, go ahead and look this way.
That was last.
Now,
Bugs
I want to
Bunny.
remind everyone that the Game Boy is built around portable gaming, yes?
Yes.
Games don't have to be super complicated or complex
Right.
to keep your bratty children occupied
Right.
on the ride to the euthanasia center. Even simple puzzle games in their own way can stand out, which is what this version of the franchise does on Game Boy. Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle was released in 1989 and came out on the Famicom, NES, and Game Boy. The history of this franchise is honestly madness, with a bunch of different licensed characters taking the mantle of headliner for this puzzle series. But oh well, let's just focus on this one. You control Bugs Bunny as you walk around individual puzzle levels with the goal to gather all the carrots. The levels are usually concise rooms full of stairs, elevators, or pipes that require you to maneuver around them to get all the pickups. You get all the carrots and you go to the next level with extra life. But the other Looney Tunes characters don't like you getting all the carrots for some reason, and if they touch you, Bugs has a seizure. You can defend yourself by avoiding them completely on the structures, or by pushing blocks or other objects into them or onto them from a height, and you can even pick up a boxing glove to knock the crap out of them. This is basically the whole game in a nutshell, with the levels becoming more and more complex. This simple concept might not seem like it's anything special, but you'd be surprised how much you can get sucked into the gameplay
Less is more, as they say.
and continue playing even after you reach your destination.
Right.
There's a reason the Crazy Castle franchise survived more years than most people realize. Have any other Game Boy games that don't receive the perfect amount of love? Leave them in the comments. Bye everyone, till next time.
Alright, cool. This was a good level one too. When I get a chance another time, we'll check out the one for the Game Boy Color. Other than that though, shout out to SleepyheadDree though for these nostalgia of video games though. I will check his other one as well too. He has one about the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo, and Sega Genesis. Other than that, it's your boy T-Bird signing off. One love.